The planet Valora was quiet. Its skies were painted with shades of pink and gold at dawn, the gentle sunlight reflecting off its calm oceans. The people of Valora had lived in peace for generations, cultivating their cities amid the soft hills and shallow valleys. Nature here was delicate, and the Valorans had learned to live without disturbing the balance. Their technology was advanced enough to protect them from minor threats, but nothing could prepare them for what was coming. It started with the reports. Scouts returning from the northern borders spoke of strange movements, shapes in the distance that did not belong. The Kralons, a species feared throughout the galaxy, were approaching. Valorans had never faced war in their time. Their society had grown soft, used to diplomacy and safety. Panic began to spread like wildfire. Governor Elara of Valora stood on the balcony of the capital tower, staring out at the distant horizon where the Kralons were reported. Her hands trembled slightly. "We cannot handle this alone," she muttered. Her advisors nodded in agreement, their faces pale. The decision was made quickly. Valora would call for help from the Galactic Council. They sent a signal, coded and urgent, describing the threat in vivid detail. Every word conveyed fear, desperation, and hope. They believed reinforcements would come, soldiers trained for battle, careful, controlled, and precise. They did not expect what would arrive instead. When the signal reached Earth, it was misrouted. A clerical error in the Galactic Council's communications network caused the distress call to be sent to a unit known as the Deathworlders. These humans were infamous across star systems. They were bred and trained to survive on the deadliest planets. Places where the air could burn lungs, water could poison with a single sip, and wildlife could tear a person apart in moments. The Deathworlders were nothing like the Valorans expected. Tall, muscular, and moving with unnatural precision. They wore dark, reinforced armor that reflected the sun in harsh glints. Their eyes were sharp, calculating, and unafraid. Weapons hung from their bodies in ways that would have terrified the Valorans had they been watching at that moment. The first Deathworlder ship descended through Valora's clouds, kicking up wind and dust. The city's alarms went off as citizens ran to the streets, unsure what was happening. The sky darkened with the shadow of the massive transport ship, its engines roaring with a sound they had never heard. Governor Elara, expecting polite officers, stared in disbelief. When the ramp lowered, a dozen Deathworlders strode down, each step confident, each movement deliberate. Some tested weapons by firing at small rocks and trees, watching them shatter. Smoke rose from the ground, and the Valorans flinched instinctively. "Stay calm," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "They are here to help." One of the Deathworlders noticed her. He removed his helmet, revealing a face hardened by countless battles. "We received your call," he said in a calm but deep voice. "We are here to secure the area." Elara nodded slowly, unsure whether to be relieved or terrified. The Deathworlder's presence was intimidating. "Thank you, I think," she said. She gestured toward the northern borders. "The Kralons are coming. They've already reached the outer settlements." The Deathworlders did not hesitate. They moved like predators. Their weapons were sleek and efficient, their movements precise. They did not wait for instructions or guidance. They assessed the terrain, measured distances, and began planning in silence. Meanwhile, news of their arrival spread across the planet. Families peered from windows, children clinging to their parents. The Deathworlders' reputation had preceded them in stories and legends among humans, but these Valorans had never imagined seeing them in person. Rumors had called them monsters, survival experts, and heroes, but seeing them was unlike anything they had expected. In the north, the first Kralon patrols approached. They were large, with thick armor and razor-sharp claws. They had conquered other planets before, confident in their strength, but they had never faced Deathworlders. The first engagement was terrifying. Deathworlders leapt from the hills, ambushing the Kralons with strategies the Valorans could not comprehend. They moved through toxic swamps without hesitation, crossed cliff edges that would have been fatal for ordinary humans, and used the environment in ways that seemed impossible. Rocks were toppled to crush enemies. Rivers were redirected to wash them away, and fire traps were set with uncanny accuracy. Valorans watched in awe. What they feared at first, the Deathworlders' extreme methods, was actually saving lives. One of the Deathworlders grabbed a Valoran child clinging to a cliff edge and swung them safely to the ground before a collapsing rock could strike. He handed the child back to her mother without a word, then disappeared into the brush, already planning his next move. Governor Alara struggled to reconcile what she was seeing. These humans, they are dangerous. But they are protecting us. The Krayons were confused. They expected easy targets. Timid humans like those of Valora. They had not anticipated beings who could survive in conditions that would kill any normal soldier instantly. They were forced to retreat temporarily, regrouping in fear. By nightfall, the Deathworlders had established a defensive perimeter around the outer settlements. They patrolled in pairs, eyes constantly scanning for danger. Muscles tense but relaxed, like predators who were always ready to strike. The Valorans began to feel a strange mixture of fear and respect. At a council meeting that evening, Alara spoke to her advisors. We called for help, and something extraordinary arrived. These humans, they are unlike anything we have known. Their methods are harsh, their ways frightening, but their purpose is clear. They are here to fight for us. In the darkness, far from Valora, the Krayons plotted. They had underestimated humanity before, and they would pay for it. The Deathworlders, oblivious to politics and hesitation, prepared for the next wave. They trained Valoran volunteers in basic tactics, showing them how to use the environment to their advantage. They did not sugarcoat anything. Stay alert, one said. The world is dangerous. If you want to survive, you must be ready to fight. Some Valorans were inspired, others were terrified. Children whispered stories of the strange humans who moved like shadows and struck like lightning. Farmers, teachers, and merchants watched in silence as the Deathworlders moved through the land with confidence and purpose. The first night was tense. The Krayons launched small raids, testing the perimeter. Every attempt failed. The Deathworlders anticipated the moves, countered them before they happened, and struck back with precision. The Krayons began to retreat further than expected, their confidence shaken. Governor Alara looked up at the night sky, where the stars shone above her. She felt a strange pride in humanity, though these humans were far from Valora's own. Their courage, their adaptability, and their sheer survival instinct were undeniable. Perhaps, she thought, the universe was not as merciless as she feared because some humans were capable of facing death itself without hesitation. By dawn, the first day of chaos had passed. Valora's citizens began to whisper about the Deathworlders not as monsters, but as saviors. Their methods were extreme, their presence overwhelming, but their results were undeniable. And far to the north, the Krayons realized they had encountered something entirely unexpected. Humanity was not gentle. Humanity was not weak. Humanity survived. The real battle was just beginning. The sun rose over Valora, casting long shadows across the hills and valleys where the Deathworlders had set their defenses. Birds chirped uncertainly, sensing the tension in the air. The peaceful planet, once untouched by war, now trembled under the shadow of an approaching conflict. The Krayons had regrouped overnight, more determined than ever, to crush the humans who had so unexpectedly disrupted their advance. In the northern hills, a squad of Deathworlders moved with silent precision. Each step was deliberate, each movement calculated. They surveyed the terrain with keen eyes, analyzing potential attack routes and weak points in the approaching enemy lines. Unlike the Valorans, who trembled at every shadow, these humans seemed at home in danger. One of them, a tall figure named Kale, crouched behind a jagged rock. He motioned to the others with a simple hand signal. They'll come from the ridge. Wait for my mark. His voice was low but firm, carrying authority without needing to shout. The Krayons, meanwhile, crept through the valleys below, unaware that the humans were already waiting. They had never fought against a species like this one, that could adapt to any terrain, move faster than expected, and strike with deadly efficiency. Their confidence began to waver as they neared the Deathworlders' positions. At Kale's signal, the ambush began. Rocks fell, nets snapped, and small explosive charges detonated, sending the Krylons scattering. But it was the Deathworlders themselves who were most frightening. They moved like shadows, striking swiftly, dodging attacks that would have killed any ordinary soldier, and disappearing before their enemies could respond. Velorans watching from the safety of the capital gasped. They had never seen combat like this. Where they expected a chaotic, destructive battle, there was instead a strange kind of order. Each Deathworlder knew exactly what to do, anticipating the Krylons' moves with uncanny skill. Governor Alara stood at the edge of the city with her advisors, gripping the railing of the observation deck. "They are terrifying," she admitted. "But they are saving lives at the same time." A child tugged at her sleeve. "Why aren't they scared?" the boy asked. "I would be scared." Alara looked down at him, a small smile on her face. "Because they are human," she said. "Sometimes humans are brave in ways even the bravest of us cannot imagine." The battle continued through the morning. The Krylons tried different tactics, sending groups to flank the Deathworlders or attack from higher ground. But each attempt failed. The Deathworlders adapted instantly, using the environment to their advantage. Toxic swamps were used as natural traps, cliffs became barriers and ambush points. Even the forests seemed to obey the humans' will, as they led the Krylons into carefully planned mazes of danger. One particularly daring Deathworlder, a woman named Lyra, led a small group directly into the heart of a Krylon patrol. She moved with a grace that seemed impossible for someone carrying heavy armor and weapons. Her team followed without hesitation. In minutes, they had neutralized the enemy patrol, leaving no trace of their passage except for the bewildered and defeated Krylons. Velorans who witnessed these actions began to understand a new truth. These humans were unlike anything they had ever known. They were not just soldiers. They were survivors, explorers, and protectors all at once. Meanwhile, the Krylons were learning fear. They had faced many species across the galaxy, but none had resisted them with such ruthless efficiency. Every attack was met with a counterattack that seemed to anticipate their every move. Confusion and panic began to spread among their ranks. By midday, Veloran volunteers had started assisting the Deathworlders. Armed with simple weapons, they were taught basic tactics: how to use the terrain, how to move silently, and how to defend themselves without panicking. At first, they stumbled, frightened by the violence around them. But slowly, guided by the example of the Deathworlders, they began to find courage within themselves. One Veloran, a teacher named Jalen, stepped forward during training. "I never thought I could do this," he said, adjusting his makeshift weapon. "But watching them, I feel like I can fight too." Kale nodded. "You can. Just remember one thing. Stay calm, think ahead, and don't panic. Fear is the enemy as much as the Krylons." By late afternoon, the Krylons launched their largest assault yet, converging on the northern settlements. The Deathworlders were ready. They had set traps, created choke points, and prepared ambushes in every possible location. The battle was fierce. Explosions shook the ground. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning vegetation. Yet through it all, the Deathworlders moved with an almost unnatural precision. They were everywhere at once, striking where the Krylons were weakest, disappearing when they were outnumbered, and always returning with reinforcements from unexpected directions. Velorans watched in awe and horror. Their cities had never known such violence. Yet for the first time, they felt hope. These humans, terrifying as they were protecting them with every skill at their disposal. During the battle, Lyra saved a group of children trapped in a collapsed building. She lifted beams with the strength of a dozen men, shielding the children from falling debris and carrying them to safety. The children clung to her, terrified but alive. When she returned them to their parents, she said nothing. Her only gesture was a nod, as if to say, "We survive, so others can." This simple act of bravery changed the hearts of many Velorans. They began to see the Deathworlders not as monsters, but as heroes, humans who faced death without hesitation to protect lives, even those who had never met them. As night approached, the battlefield quieted, though not without cost. Some Valoran buildings had been damaged. Trees and hills bore scars from the fights, but the Krayons had been repelled. Their forces scattered and demoralized. The Deathworlders set up their camp near the northern ridge, tending to their own injuries and those of the Valorans they had trained. Governor Alara visited the camp, accompanied by a small delegation. She approached Kale, who was overseeing patrol preparations. "Your methods, they are unlike anything we have ever seen," she said carefully. Kale shrugged. "We do what must be done. Survival is not polite. It is necessary." Alara nodded slowly, trying to absorb the weight of what she had witnessed. "You are extraordinary. Terrifying. But extraordinary." Kale's eyes softened slightly. "We do not fight for glory. We fight because it is the right thing to do. Others may not understand our ways, but results are clear. The planet is safe for now." That night, Valorans gathered in small groups, speaking quietly about the humans who had saved them. Stories of daring attacks, bravery, and survival spread quickly. Children whispered tales of Deathworlders leaping over cliffs, dodging attacks, and saving lives with impossible strength and speed. Meanwhile, the Krayons retreated to their distant base, licking their wounds and planning their next move. They were no longer confident invaders. They had faced a species that adapted to every challenge, that could survive anywhere, and that struck with unpredictable force. Back at the Deathworlders' camp, Lyra sat by a small fire, cleaning her weapons. Kale joined her, handing her a cup of warm water. "The next wave will come," he said simply. Lyra nodded. "Let them come. We will be ready." Across the northern ridge, the stars began to twinkle in the clear Valoran sky. For the first time in weeks, the planet felt a fragile peace, but deep in the minds of the Valorans, a realization began to form. Humanity was not gentle. Humanity was not weak. But humanity could protect, survive, and inspire in ways they had never imagined. The real test was still ahead. The Krayons would return stronger, more determined, yet the Deathworlders, undaunted by danger, would be ready, and the Valorans, inspired by their example, would begin to learn that courage was not only in strength, but in the willingness to act when others hesitated. The clash of worlds had begun. Valora would never be the same, and the galaxy, far beyond this quiet planet, was about to witness a humanity that refused to be underestimated. The morning sun rose over Valora, painting the hills with light that promised hope but carried tension. The Krayons had regrouped overnight. They were larger in number this time, more organized, and more determined to crush the humans and the Valorans who dared resist. Their heavy armor gleamed under the early sunlight, and their claws scraped across the rocks as they advanced toward the northern settlements. The Deathworlders were already waiting. Their camp, once a simple cluster of tents and makeshift defenses, had transformed overnight into a stronghold of ingenuity. Traps, barriers, and observation posts had been set up, all designed to use the terrain to its fullest advantage. Every Deathworlder knew their role, and every Valoran who had trained alongside them understood the basics of survival. Kale stood at the ridge, overlooking the advancing Krayons. His expression was calm, almost serene, though inside he was preparing for the storm of battle. "Remember," he said to the Valoran volunteers beside him, "courage is not absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it." The first Krayons reached the outer perimeter. They charged with a roar that shook the ground. Claws extended and eyes filled with malice. The Deathworlders moved with lightning speed. Lyra led a squad through the cliffs, dropping heavy rocks to crush the front line. Kale and his team launched precision attacks from hidden positions, striking weak points in the enemy armor. Valorans watched in disbelief. The humans moved in ways that seemed impossible. They were everywhere at once, climbing cliffs, jumping across ravines, swinging from trees, all while striking enemies with perfect timing. Every movement had a purpose. Every attack was precise. The Kralons, for the first time, faltered. Among the Valorans, fear began to turn into admiration. Jalen, the teacher who had joined the volunteers, shouted to the others, "Do what they do. Trust yourself. We can fight." His voice carried over the chaos, inspiring nearby civilians to act. Together, humans and Valorans began to push the Kralons back, their courage growing with every success. The battle moved toward the Central Valley, where the largest group of Kralons had gathered. It was a death trap, but the Deathworlders thrived in such conditions. KL signaled to the others, and they split into teams. Some led the Kralons into narrow ravines lined with traps. Others used Valora's rivers, diverting water to sweep enemies off cliffs. The terrain became a weapon, bending to the strategy of the humans. In the heart of the fight, Lyra spotted a group of Kralons cornering a family of Velorons. Without hesitation, she charged. Her squad followed, striking with unmatched ferocity. They cleared the enemies and carried the family to safety, moving through the battlefield as if protected by instinct itself. The Valorans' eyes were wide with awe. Here, in front of them, humanity displayed its fullest power. Courage, skill, and selflessness. As the sun reached its highest point, the Kralons began to retreat again. But not easily. Kale knew they would attempt one final push, desperate to claim victory. He prepared for it, setting up the ultimate defensive positions. The Deathworlders coordinated silently, communicating with hand signals, glances, and a shared understanding that transcended words. The final wave came at dusk. It was brutal, relentless, and terrifying. Claws met blades, energy weapons fired in arcs of light, and explosions shook the valley. Yet the Deathworlders held their ground, guiding the Valorans to defend key points and teaching them strategies on the fly. In the thick of the fight, Kael faced a massive Kralon commander. The creature towered over him, claws raised, snarling. Kael didn't hesitate. Using a combination of agility and strength, he dodged the first attack and struck back at the creature's weak point. The Kralon staggered, but it was not yet defeated. Kael used every skill he had, every tactic learned from years surviving Deathworld conditions, to finally bring the commander down. Elsewhere, Lyra and her squad destroyed the remaining Kralon units in the valley, cutting off their escape. One by one, the enemy fell back, finally realizing they could not win against humans, who thrived in danger and adapted faster than they could anticipate. When the last Kralon fled, the battlefield fell silent. The ground was scarred, trees splintered, and smoke rose in thin columns. But Valora had survived. The Deathworlders regrouped, tending to injuries, helping the Valorans, and ensuring every life was accounted for. Governor Alara arrived at the battlefield, her heart pounding. She looked at the Deathworlders with a mixture of gratitude, awe, and something new respect that went beyond admiration. "You saved us," she said, her voice steady despite exhaustion. Kael shook his head slightly. "We did what had to be done. The planet is safe, but survival is a responsibility. Do not forget it." The Valorans gathered around, their eyes wide, hearts full of admiration. They had seen humanity's courage firsthand. They had witnessed people who faced unimaginable dangers without hesitation. They had seen humans not just fight, but inspire, teach, and protect, even when the odds seemed impossible. One of the young Valoran volunteers, a girl named Mira, approached Lyra shyly. You are amazing," she said. "I want to be like you." Lyra smiled, a rare soft moment after the chaos. "You already are," she said. "Courage is something you carry inside. We only help bring it out." That night, as Valora slowly returned to a fragile peace, the citizens celebrated quietly. Fires burned in the streets, not from destruction but from small ceremonies honoring the bravery of the humans who had fought beside them. Children spoke of Deathworlders as heroes. Adults whispered stories of their incredible skills, their fearlessness, and their determination to survive and protect. The Deathworlders did not seek fame. They repaired what they could, ensured the Valorans were safe, and prepared to leave. Kale gathered his team for departure. "Our work here is done," he said. "Valora is safe. Remember what you learned. Survival, courage, and action are more important than fear." Governor Alara approached him once more. "Will you return if we need you?" she asked. Kale shook his head. "We do not stay. We survive. We move forward. You have learned enough to continue. But if the universe calls again, humanity will answer." With that, the Deathworlders boarded their ships. The engines roared to life, stirring the dust of Valora, and they lifted into the night sky. The Valorans watched in silence, hearts full of awe and gratitude. For them, humanity was no longer distant, abstract, or unknown. Humanity had arrived, survived, and inspired. As the stars swallowed the departing ships, Valora's citizens looked to the future with a new understanding. Humans were strange, terrifying, and relentless, but they were also heroes in the truest sense. When faced with impossible odds, humans did not hesitate. They adapted, they survived, and they protected others without expectation of reward. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Kralons regrouped, humiliated, and defeated. They had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten. Humans were unpredictable, fearless, and far stronger than they appeared. They had underestimated humanity, and it had cost them dearly. For Valora, life would never be the same. Fear had turned into courage. Weakness had turned into resilience. And humanity, in its raw, unstoppable form, had left a mark that would last for generations. The galaxy beyond still held dangers, still held enemies who would test every world. But Valora knew this truth now. When humans answered the call, no challenge was too great. Courage, ingenuity, and the will to survive were weapons no one could match. And so, the planet slept under the stars, safe for now, forever changed by the humans who came when help was called for, and saved them in ways no one could have imagined.